And now, here I am. I have entitled this tonight, Event Horizon. And I don't know whether you're familiar with what an event horizon. How many of you know what an event horizon is? Okay. So theoretically, nobody's actually put this to the test, but scientists are sure of it, that at a black hole, you come to a certain point where if you cross over that event horizon, there's no turning back. And once you're inside that and headed towards the black hole, nothing can escape, they say, not even light. As I say, nobody's ever tested that. I'm amazed at what scientists are sure they know. Yeah. At any rate, it does describe, I think, the era that we're living, the times that we're living. We have reached a point in the world of no return. I mentioned earlier to some people that the world is getting worse. People are getting more rude and mean and cruel, which of course is exactly what was predicted. Jesus said that in the last days, when the Son of Man comes back, will he find love in the world? Well, that seemed like sort of a strange question until you look around us now. Yeah. There's not a lot of love, a lot of hate, a lot of division. Oh, no. And so I believe we've reached a point where there's probably no turning back. Now, on the one hand, that seemed like an awful thing, but on the other hand, maybe in that black hole, it's the most wonderful experience ever. Nobody's ever been there. I'm being a little bit facetious. This event horizon, we're going to look at Luke 21:28 to begin with tonight, but we're going to be in Matthew 24 in particular. Jesus said, "And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up." Okay, so there are specific, precise things that Jesus said would happen. He said, when you see those things, look up. For your redemption draweth nigh. The closer we get to that black hole, the closer we get to Jesus' return, the more these things are going to be going on that seem to be flying around out of control, but are they? No, they're not out of control at all. But I want to give you a couple of items of news, as we always do. The first one is about abortion. Some of you may have heard that the Republican Party has been fiddling around with their stance on abortion, their platform. Have you heard that? Okay, well, I want to give you some encouraging information. If I can get rid of all the advertisements. So, Marsha Blackburn, pretty good congresswoman. And she was asked about this and said some things I think it'd be worth you noting. Blackburn addressed, can you read that at all? Okay. Blackburn addressed concerns from some of the pro-life crowd. I don't like the way he says that. Like we're some kind of an odd bunch. As the list of 20 promises in the Republican platform did not include anything about the pro-life cause. However, Blackburn said it is absolutely mentioned in the 16-page document, assuring the Republican Party is the party of life. And don't drink too much baking soda. The Republican Party is the pro-life party. It's the pro-family party. It is always going to be that, she said, explaining that the party platform is not an in-depth, long-form missive. This is something, as I said, it is a total of 16 pages, and it is a promise that these are the things that we are going to do. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Just I thought you would like to know, because it's probably been somewhat distressing to you, that the Republicans seem to be softening on this, and they probably are. Because, well, there's a lot of reasons for that.
You know, that black hole that you showed there, Brother Doug, kind of reminds me of what it seems like hell's going to be like. Once you get there,
there's a certain point. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that can happen that you can reach that point. Jesus can come back. You can die. But there are other things as well. You can lose your mind. And, the older I get, I'm going to be 71. Fortunately, I have the body of a 50-year-old. I lost my train of thought. That goes along with it. So you can lose your mind. And that can happen while we've got things going on, the food that we're putting in, the stuff that's going on, the microplastics that are now we're finding out is in our bodies. And there are a lot of things going on that are absolutely driving people to lose their mind. And I don't mean crazy, I mean Alzheimer's and dementia, that sort of thing. And it can happen surprisingly fast and to anybody. So there are multiple things that can happen, and somebody then would reach the horizon point where they cannot go back. And that's why we need to share with people, because I don't know if you have tomorrow. We don't know if these kids coming to our vacation Bible school that have reached the age where they understand. That's been where I understand when a kid is ready to be saved, is when they can articulate to me what sin is and what their sin does to God. Until they've reached that point, they've not reached the point where they can be saved. But when they've reached that point, we need to make a harvest, because we don't know about tomorrow. So there's this archbishop. You may have heard of him, Vijano. He was just recently, this last week, excommunicated by the Pope. Pope Francis. So here's what this tweet says about him. So he was excommunicated by the church by order of Francis, issued a grave warning. Okay, what more are you going to do to him? You excommunicate him. He's going to hell. What more are you going to... I'm sorry. Take a breath. The Pope gave him a grave warning, alleging that the Pope is an enthusiastic collaborator in the great... Oh, so I get it. Vijano is making a warning against the Pope. He claims that the Pope's goal is to dismantle the church and replace it with an organization inspired by Masonic principles. He further contends that there is a sinister conspiracy between the deep state. Well, I thought the Democrats said there was no deep state.
Well, why did they deny everything else? Why wouldn't they?
In fact, the Republicans said that too. The deep church. And reminds us that Pope is a Jesuit. You may not know what that means. A Jesuit cannot be trusted. They're bloodthirsty. They'll stab their people in the back. Okay, that's a thing in the Catholic Church, a Jesuit. And the Pope is a Jesuit. So, did you notice about this guy, though? Carlo Maria. Sounds like he's having a bit of a gender dysphoria as well. But you know why he's got the middle name? He added Maria because he's Catholic. Anyway, here's what the Vatican City said about him. So this is not me making anything up. As Pope Francis continued attempts to mediate the conflict in Ukraine, former Vatican envoy and outspoken papal critic Archbishop Carlo Vijano released a letter Monday, March 7th, so this was a couple months ago, blaming the deep state forces in the United States, the European Union, and NATO for triggering the current war and demonizing Russia. The United States of America and the European states must not marginalize Russia, but build an alliance with it, not only to restart trade for the prosperity of all, but in lieu of the reconstruction of the Christian civilization, which will be the only one able to save the world from the transhuman and medical technical globalist monster. The Archbishop wrote. So we've talked about some of those things. Now, to me, the reason I'm putting this to you is because it is about prophetic news. Transhumanism, we've talked about that a lot. Many of us have already been altered, right? We have hearing aids, we have heart assistance devices, and that just begins to, Elon is working on wonderful things for you. They're going to plug it into your brain, and it's going to be wonderful. They'll be able to dial you up or down.
Can we try it on him first?
Well, let's try it on you first, and then we'll see how we like it.
I got no need for it.
Actually, I don't know if I shared this with you, but the guy who they did that to this last year, he began to develop some problems. And I don't remember all the problems, but they had to remove the device. See, who you are isn't ultimately completely about your body or your brain. There is more to you. You know, I've shared with you when David said in the Psalms things that happened down here in the gut, down here in his belly. He might not have been so far. He might have been exactly right. So there's this thing of our spirit and soul. It's right here, but where exactly is here? Scientists are figuring out there's more to it. Anyway, so Vajano said that. The Archbishop wants a papal nuncio, an ambassador to the United States, among other countries, has a keen understanding of what happens in rooms of power and influence. But since accusing Francis of covering up allegations of sex abuse against disgraced ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, going so far as to ask for the Pope's resignation in 2018, this guy may be messed up in a lot of ways, but I kind of like this guy. Yeah, Vajano has been welcomed into the ranks of a small but outspoken Catholic conservative right. His rhetoric has increasingly leaned on, here's where I really wanted to get you to, okay? Increasingly leaned on anti-migrant, anti-vaccine, and pro-Trump takes. Yeah, I like this guy. I don't even know him. Anyway, there's that going on. Here's something else by way of news. I ripped this off from another Prophecy Buff's website. And he said, why should I reinvent the wheel? Here are the Hamas, and this is just 6 of them. Here's the Hamas fighters who have been killed.
And we talked a little bit about this, but this is very important. Zarit Zahavi, who is the leader, the founder of Alma Research, which focuses on the problems with Hezbollah in the north, she made a very interesting point. If you go to Al-Manar, that's the Hezbollah media page, and open it in Chrome and you can get the translation. They have a memorial page for every single Hezbollah fighter killed since October 7th. It's 330 some now. And every one of them has a page. So the guy in the middle there was the guy who was killed. If you click on his picture, you will get this memorial page. Now, what do you notice about the memorial page? One thing you notice is that there's the Hezbollah logo, and there's what else? The Dome of the Rock. Because you need to understand, this is what this war in the north is about. It's not about the Israel-Lebanon border. It's about Israel in general and Jerusalem in particular. And that is exactly what Bible prophecy says is going to happen in the end times. The nations will gather together against Israel. If you translate every one of these guys, all 330 of them have something about them on this page, but then they have this phrase right here. It says this: on the road to Jerusalem, he was martyred. Every single dead Hezbollah fighter talks about being martyred on the road to Jerusalem. That's what this is all about. Hezbollah is also threatening the gas fields. They've put up videos about this. This is an article from the Washington Institute. And this could be a problem. What happens if Hezbollah starts attacking those gas fields? Those gas fields are vital to Israel. Israel uses that gas to power desalination plants, which allows them to alleviate potential water problems. What happens if Hezbollah starts firing missiles out there and the companies that are operating those platforms say, hey, when you get this thing resolved with Hezbollah, we'll be back. And so what Hezbollah is getting is a lot of bang for their buck on these drones and missiles and rockets far beyond the cost of what those drones, missiles, and rockets cost. The costs to Israel are enormous in terms of economy, loss opportunity, gas resources, and that sort of thing.
There are several things that when I hear them, they make me want to cry or scream. One of them, free Palestine. Do you know Israel did that? That's why there's a Palestine. They gave it over to them. They could have taken all the tens of millions of dollars that Europe and the world have sent them, and they could have built infrastructure, highways. They could have built themselves a nation, literally. They'd been free, and look what they did with it. Just recently, I was talking to somebody who was in the IDF, and you hear people say, you know, the Hamas is not the Palestinian people. As they have gone through and done the things that they've had to do, in every home of the Palestinians, there was weapons, there was rifles, munitions, etc., in every home. And very often, they would send the children to interact with the IDF, to gather information, bring it back to them. And those homes, those innocent Gazans, would fire on the IDF then. So what are you going to do? So Israel discovered gas on their property out in the ocean. And now Muslims want that. So they want to redefine where the territories are to say that's ours. Not even real. I mean, I don't know how you fix stupid. Israel takes the gas, makes electricity, and sends it to Palestine. If they stop that, Palestine, Gaza, doesn't get electricity. That's been going on for years. At some point, Israel would finally cut off the electricity and the water because they were firing rockets at them. Okay, what are they supposed to do? Kiss you? Okay. Did you know that there is an Old Testament prophecy that Israel would discover in the last times oil? And now they have. Isn't that amazing? Might even be the hook that Ezekiel talked about that would bring Israel or bring Russia down to Israel. Anyway, so I want to talk about some characteristics and trends leading up to the tribulation. Talk about some things already in place and some things that are not quite there yet. But I want you to see, if we get through this, that we have reached an event horizon. We've reached a point of no return, I think. So, Israel, 1948, I mean, that's huge. When was a nation ever destroyed, people scattered, and then they become a nation again? There isn't any other nation on the earth that's happened to. It's an act of God. Deception, and all these things are in the early verses of Matthew 24. Jesus gave that private briefing to the disciples. He said, so it's really kind of funny. The disciples said, "Isn't this temple beautiful?" And Jesus said, "You think that's beautiful? There's coming a day when not one stone left on top of another." Well, this got the disciples' interest. And they said, "Lord, tell us when these things will be." So Jesus sat down with them on the Mount of Olives, and he gave them a private briefing for their eyes and ears only. And he told them, among other things, he said, and remember the first thing, and he said it several times through that very long soliloquy on end times. He said, first of all, don't let anybody deceive you. Now, why would he say that? I reposted on Facebook today something about how did it go? Don't make fun of children who believe in Santa Claus. There's still people who believe it's on Facebook. Right? People are easily deceived. I would be easily deceived if it was not for one thing. the Word of God.
Amen.
That one thing. So deception is a big deal. That we're there. Huh. I mean, you look at these things going on in our nation, and there are people. I just heard it today. I don't remember whether it was Harvard. I think it was Yale. That now, if you get 80 on a test, that's an A. I was in a class when I was at Midwestern Seminary where the professor was renowned because his legacy was nobody in any of his classes ever gets an A. Now, that's a class you want to have. But so what's this doing? What's this doing to a kid that's got a sheepskin from Yale or any of these universities? Business and smart people have to be looking at that saying, okay, if Yale, Harvard, Columbia, if it's on their resume, I'm going to keep looking at more resumes. You realize that's flipped around. No longer is Yale, Harvard, and et cetera, the Ivy League schools, the place to get smart people. So, age of deception, we could go on and on about the deception. False Christs. Really? There are false Christs? Let's just go see. So I don't think much of Wikipedia. It's liberal as can be. But they did put together a list of people who claim to be Jesus. You've got the 17th, 18th, 19th century, but let's just go on to the 20th century and on to the 21st century. These are all people who claim to be Christ. Wow. That's a lot of people. And here we go. So in the 20th century, Reverend Sung Young Moon, he was Jesus. He had a huge following. Jesus said, if somebody says Christ is over here, don't believe it. He won't be over here. He'll be coming from up here. How safe do you feel? I'm not trying to scare anybody. There's never been a time in my 71 years that I've been aware of it, let's say the last 50 years, where we have been closer to wars. We not only have Russia that I had to worry about when I was, in grade school back in the 60s. I had to dive and duck under my desk, right? Cuban Missile Crisis. How many other nations could we add to Russia? China now has the capability. In the 60s, China didn't have the capability to do anything in the United States. Can China do something to us now? Yeah.
How about North Korea?
North Korea, Iran. It's really kind of unsettling to think of the number of people that hate us and would do us harm. So we've come to a time that I believe, even from a war standpoint or rumors of wars, we've reached the event horizon. Would you agree with this statement? It's more likely when we have war, not if we have war?
Yes.
That's a scary thought. And the thing of deception, I'd like to go back and talk about this quite a bit, but the Cuban Missile Crisis. The CIA and the KGB had just been invented post-World War II. You're being told what they want you to hear. You can't trust CNN, MSNBC, none of the networks. You can only marginally trust Fox a little bit more. At least you're going to get the facts. But, so, we could go to war because of a miscalculation. We could go to war because the elites have decided, yeah, let's do that. Because the elites are not just in the United States and they're not just in Russia, right? I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist because, frankly, it's no longer a theory. We're being fed what they want us to hear, and they're going to manipulate. So we know Bill Gates and those elites, their greatest heart's desire is for there to be fewer and fewer of mouths to feed. It's an unsettling thought when a pandemic happens and millions die. They say, well, that's the plan. It's hard for us to even wrap our head around that kind of evil, but that's where it is. Yeah, that was the book that was written by the World Economic Forum. They haven't changed. They've just refined their message to be more palatable. You know, I told you last week that the FDA had declared gun shootings a national health crisis. Well, that's an interesting way to go about it. Go back and read what the founding fathers said about everybody having a gun. And they want to take it away. Look at Australia. They took their guns away. They have no way of resisting now. Now, for whoever's listening, whatever three-letter agency happens to listen to this tonight, I have no intentions of getting involved in a civil war. I'm too old for that kind of thing. I may protect my property, but I'm not getting involved in a civil war. But I remember, so when I was getting my concealed carry, and I sat at the sheriff's office here in Jackson County, waiting for them to fingerprint me, right, let that sink in. Okay, you can have a gun, but we need to know who you are and where you live. Okay. I was sitting next to a guy who was a big union guy. And we got to talking, and he asked me, I think I asked him first why he was getting his concealed carry. And he asked me then why I was getting mine. And I said, Obama was president at the time. And I said, I don't plan to shoot anybody. I just want my number to be among those that Obama knows is out here. My new friend won't speak to me now. He never said another word. That was it. I think there's a huge deterrence factor with there being so many guns out there. It's a deterrence to the government. It's a deterrence to China. Yeah. And of course, now in Missouri, you don't have to go through all that. In fact, it's kind of crazy that I can drive my car in any of the 50 states because I have a driver's license in Missouri.
Yeah. But don't take a gun.
Exactly, especially to the communist state of Illinois.
You cannot.
No.
There is no
No.
carry in Illinois.
I had a friend who was a church member when I was pastor in Illinois. He became a highway patrolman. Good guy. Him and his wife are the sweetest, best Christians. They love me. I love them. We were getting ready to travel over to visit my daughter. And I messaged her and I said, would you ask him how I can carry my weapon as I travel through Illinois? And the answer, yeah, that's what the law says. Got to be locked, ammunition separate. Basically, he responded, you can't. And so I said, okay, so the law says I have to keep the ammunition and weapons separate. I said, would you tell Ken to tell all the bad guys to do that too? By the way, a guy who did training for highway patrol, he did target practice training and all for the... He trained officers to be able to recognize certain things in criminals. And the first thing he said was, bad guys never carry their weapon in a holster. He said, if you encounter somebody with a holster, they're a good guy. Generally speaking, there's going to be exceptions to every rule. You know, I never understood until I read him. He said that's the reason for the hoodie.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like an inconvenient place to draw your weapon as far as I'm concerned, but that's just me. Let's move along. famines, pestilences, earthquakes, and false prophets. That's what Jesus said at the beginning of Matthew 24. We have talked about it much. There's much more to be said. Um, one of the ways that the communists actually put in their literature was a way for a country to control their people was through hunger. Do you realize how quickly you would go hungry if you didn't prepare? Right here in America. Let me ask you a question. If all at once something tragic happened and there was no food flowing to the grocery stores, so once that first 12 hours and all the stuff is gone, how many of you could eat for a month? Okay, a little over half of you. That's pretty good. How many of you could go 3 months? 3 months. Anti-Semitism. In 24:9, Jesus said that they're going to hate you. Now, he was talking to Jewish disciples about what was going to happen to the Jews during the tribulation. So leading up to the tribulation, we're talking about things that are already in place. Is there already an anti-Semitic mentality in the world? And this is one of the things that's different now, not just anti-Semitism. There's always been. Pharaoh said, kill those baby boys, right? So there's always been anti-Semitism, but not globally. Hitler wasn't able to do it on a global scale. It's global. This is, as I've told you before, we have never been here. The world has never been where we are right now. Now, I say that, and that sounds like such a stupid statement. Of course, we've never been in circumstances that came anywhere near this. There have been bad things here and there, and awful, the Black Plague and many things. We've never been where we are with all of these things coming into play now. Actually, Jonathan Cahn does a great thing in The Return of the Gods. He does a great thing going back to Daniel. Did you know that there's actually a connection with the Antichrist and technology? Technology God. Now, as I told you before, technology is great until the wrong person's in charge of it. Now, as I've told you for a couple of weeks now, the creepiest thing that humanity ever thought up was the dead bot. You know, the dead bot where you could take a loved one who's passed away, give the AI, now this is already in place, give the AI the recordings, the video, the pictures, the writings, that it is able to take all that and reproduce, literally reproduce it on a screen, your dead loved one. It's only, and if you had the money, you could do it now. Not many would have the money to do it. But if you had the money, you could have a robot, right? There's already robots, AI connected to the internet. You would be able to sit and have coffee with your dead loved one. That's got to be far and away the creepiest thing humanity ever thought of.
Kind of sounds like there's a mentality problem there.
Well, it's insanity. And technology, we're talking about technology while we're talking about this. So there's that. And then the gospel preached in all the world. Jesus said in Matthew 24 and 25 that before he came back, that the gospel we preached to the whole world. Now, there are still people groups that are not reached, don't have the Bible in their language, but could we say in the most general sense, the world has heard the gospel?
Basically, yeah.
So some things not in place, but in sight. A rebuilt temple. Right? Jesus said that there would be the abomination of desolation, that the Antichrist would sit in the temple and try to convince himself he's God. That predisposes the fact that there has to be a temple. There is no temple today, but they have everything in place. All they need is the word go, and the permission's there. Unified religion, and we've talked about that a lot. Climate change. I saw a video a picture today. The islands. Do you know that the ocean is at the same level on those islands as it ever was? Some of those islands that they told us back in the 60s and 70s were going to go out of sight have actually grown. Anyway, climate change really is a religion. A world leader, we don't have that yet. And one of my biggest fears, our only hope, of course, is Jesus, right? But in a political sense, our only hope in America is for Trump to give us 4 more years.
Yeah.
What if Trump turned out not to be all that we think he is? But what are you going to do? You're going to vote for Biden? I think about that Buddhist sect. There's a Buddhist sect that all they do is laugh. And that's the whole thing. That's all. They find nirvana through laughing.
So that's where she came from.
Exactly. So we're ripe for a world leader. Digital money?
Oh, yeah, it's real close.
It makes me angry every time I think about what little money I've saved in the bank. It's only worth what they say it's worth.
They're not supposed to.
No.
Well, and they've never planned on it.
But the crisis that will happen, I believe that will happen to deal with that debt issue, you'll take everything out of your bank
Oh, absolutely.
and you'll have what they say you have.
Yeah. That's what they're gonna do when they switch this over.
Yeah. And the Ezekiel 37:38 coalition, actually Psalm 83 coalition is going to happen before Ezekiel 37:38. But both of those things are coming into focus. So what do? Let me run through this real quick. Do we worry?
No.
Yeah. Jesus said, heaven and earth shall pass away in Matthew 24:35, but my word shall not pass away. The promises that we began with, can we trust him to fulfill his promises?
100%.
In fact, he said a variation of that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Are we supposed to watch?
Absolutely.
Well, if I had the time, we'll have to go into it next week. We'll look at 3 teachings that Jesus gave in this private briefing. 3 teachings to nail down what we should do.